Hello, my name is Olivia Coker, and this is my other writer's presentation on Louisa May Alcott. Louisa May Alcott was an author. She wrote in the late 1800s and mainly wrote characters, specifically women, that were considered accurate and more realistic to the lives of women that were reading these books during this time. Her work was very, very well known. She inspired many, many people, and she provided a kind of new approach to American literature with the characters that she had and the stories that she was telling. Louisa May Alcott, according to Encyclopedia Britannica's 2020 article, Louisa May Alcott was born in Germantown, Philadelphia on November 29th, 1832, and died in Pennsylvania March 6, 1888. She, again, was a renowned American New England author. She's mainly known for her novel Little Women, but she's written many, such as Little Men, Jo's Boys, and Flower Fables. She had a lot of sequels to Little Women. She had a lot of other novels and short stories, such as Flower Fables, and she also wrote for the Atlantic Monthly before she started publishing books in order to provide an income for her family. Aside from her career, Louisa May Alcott and her family were very, very pro equality for everyone. They supported feminism. They were all abolitionists and women's rights and suffrage and racial equality. The Alcott family, they participated a lot in helping with the Underground Railroad and supported many organizations, and that led to Louisa writing many of her novels and her short stories over equality and women's rights and having kind of an undertone to those concepts. Her most prominent novel, and the novel that I will be looking at today, is called Little Women. The novel Little Women is loosely based on Louisa and her own family, including mainly her sisters, and it follows four sisters who are going through a time in their lives where a lot of stuff is happening. There's a war going on. They have a lot of personal and life changes. The main character of the novel can be considered Jo March and is most based on Louisa herself. It mainly is a conversation about women and what they are considered to be in society and what the labels society has put on them have kind of affected and how it has affected their lives, such as being a wife or a mother or going to the workforce. Many of Louisa's sisters in and also the parallels in the novel, they had different paths in their lives. One wanted to be a mother, Jo wanted to be in the workforce, and so on. Louisa May Alcott believed that women should have a place in society along with everyone else, and her character Jo March believed that as well. However, Jo March was faced with a lot of skepticism and a lot of people saying that she should just be a Little Woman. She should have a place in society that is the correct place, which would be to be a mother or be at home. Jo March says, I'll try and be what he loves to call me, a little woman, and not to be rough and wild, but to do my duty here instead of wanting to be somewhere else. And she does this despite knowing that it would be against her true nature to do so. This is her way of saying that being a little woman would go against her very nature, but it is what the world wants her to be. Despite Little Women being a book that sort of reflects what society wants Louisa to be, Alcott herself kind of created a way to oppose those kind of, as I said, like kind of constricting and opposing ideas, and bring them into her novel to demonstrate more of a way that women could kind of rebel against society in a way, but really stick true to themselves. Louisa May Alcott uses many different literary devices, such as metaphors and foreshadowing, allusions, and she demonstrates kind of a lot of, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, what women kind of felt during this time. And one specific literary device that I love that Alcott uses is a motif through the novel, which is Jo March's kind of, use of, she has kind of less feminine behavior and emotion and language, and she uses that kind of to demonstrate how Jo is kind of pushing against the stream of the society, and to kind of demonstrate how Jo March is not really like her other sisters. There's a specific scene in Little Women where Jo is yelling at her sister at a meal, and is saying, "Hurry and get it done. Don't stop to quirk your little finger and simper over your plate, Amy," and happens to start choking on her tea and dropping her bread, butter sliding down on the carpet in her haste to get at the treat. And it's kind of just a demonstration of how Jo kind of has this more like aggressive behavior, and she has kind of more of an opinion with herself and kind of is all over the place because she doesn't feel the need to be put into a box that society wants her to be put into. To respond to a scholarly article kind of analyzing Little Women, Judith Featherly, she wrote an essay in 1979 that was republished in 2014 by Taylor and Francis over Little Women, titled Little Women and the Feminist Imagination. She kind of focused on how Little Women had an initial opposition to the idea of writing a novel, how Louisa May Alcott had an initial opposition of the idea of writing Little Women, mainly because when she went to her publisher and was wanting to write a book, her publisher had told her to write something that women would want to hear. And in that case, he was mainly talking about what would a man want to say to a woman. And so the novel was targeted to young girls and women about how to, be a little woman, how to be this perfect little wife and daughter and to have your place in society. And Federley is basically saying that Alcott's commitment to writing this novel created a commitment to her true style that was evidently somewhat less of a choice than a necessity, and somewhat less generated from within that imposed from than without. And that's basically saying that Louisa May Alcott kind of had to write this novel in order for her career to continue. She was being told by a male publisher what her writing needed to look like, and at the time, of course, Louisa May Alcott was wanting to provide a novel kind of more from her direction, but it had to be, a man had to step in and say, no, this is what you're going to write because this is what's only going to get published. And so Federley is also claiming that both anger and political perception are present in Little Women, and not surprisingly, there is evidence within Little Women of Alcott's ambivalence to her true style. So it's kind of also saying that Louisa May Alcott's true style kind of was skewed in this moment because we don't really get to see what she would have wanted to write and the full extent of the underlying themes of feminism and women's rights and equality for everyone is kind of muted in a way because of what the publisher may have desired at the time of the writing of this novel. So my response to Federley's idea is much of what I've said. I do believe that Alcott had those ambitious ideas and that she had a different style of writing, and kind of before Little Women kind of tended to state what she wanted to state what she wanted to state. But in order to kind of continue her career, she had to kind of, again, mute those tones and concepts of feminism and kind of a strong female character. However, I do believe that Alcott was still able to provide that strong female character through Jo March and her sisters, and demonstrating kind of like Jo March's character. Like, she is someone who swears that she would never marry a man, but she marries a man at the end of the novel, and it kind of provides, like, in its own way, a sense of rebelling against society. But of course, I think there's a lot of people today. Greta Gerwig commented on this at one point, just to say that when she directed Little Women, she was also saying that, if Louisa May Alcott perhaps had not been forced into writing this novel by a publisher, or, kind of having its own ending skewed by a male perspective, that Jo March may never have married, or somehow, maybe Jo March would have found another way to live throughout her career without having to suppress herself to society. But that's kind of how the novel went because of the way that Louisa May Alcott had to face kind of like her publisher and this new kind of, tension of how are you going to write this novel and make it fit into society. Overall, as Federley discusses, I agree kind of with her ideas with it all, and how Louisa May Alcott's decision was very much a way for self-preservation. So another scholarly article was Gregory Ensling and Anne K. Phillips' analysis of Little Women. They wrote an article called The Newness of Little Women in August of 2019 with the intention to analyze the novel and kind of its impact on readers when it first was published and on the readers of today, and kind of how it's both grown and kind of fallen back. Aisling and Phillips state that this novel, when it first was originally published, was very prominent, and people kind of were like, wow, this is amazing. It's a new kind of form of literature, as I had said before. But it kind of, as I said, it demonstrated that like we could have a woman character that was more kind of in her own way against society, but also appealed to kind of a wide range of audience because it was a story about family and it was a story about sisters. And Ainsley and Phillips are saying that during the 1800s it was a groundbreaking novel. However, they also acknowledge that while everyone seemed to be reading Little Women in 1869, the novel enjoys no such ubiquity in 2019. And this kind of means that in our current state of our world today, even in 2019, probably earlier, Little Women kind of lost some of its shine because of its, aging nature and just the fact that I think a lot of people see classics like Little Women and they don't consider it relevant to today. But they describe kind of on how, the other hand, that though it is rarely included in high school and middle school curriculum, Little Women has kind of made its way into higher education in anthologies and on syllabi and as a legitimate object for scholarly investigation, which of course was not exactly the case 50 years ago. Because at the time, between 1869 and 2019, a lot has happened. Little Women may not be as prevalent as it was back in the 1800s, but it can go to show how Little Women can find its place in its society at any time, because I believe that the relevance of Little Women can be applied to any day and age. My response to their ideas is much the same again. I agree with them saying that Little Women has kind of lost some of its relativity just because of the time period, but I also believe that it has kind of found its own place in our modern time. And as we analyze more classics and as we analyze more of our past and our history and American literature, Little Women is finding itself back into our society, like I said, through college classrooms and even in media and film. Like I had mentioned, Greta Gerwig, she recently directed Little Women as a movie, and it starred many different people, and it was a very beautiful story adapted from the original novel, and it's kind of a good example of how Little Women kind of found its way back into our society. This is the Kahoot that I have on Louisa May Alcott. It covers many of the basics of the biological information and kind of what Louisa May Alcott's life and writings was about. And these are my works cited. Thank you so much for watching my presentation.